Well, we are a little bit over 2 weeks from the Kentucky Derby. That's number 151. Obviously, we've been talking about it a little bit here and there, and obviously a ton if you consider the preps. But it's time to dive in even more over the next couple of weeks. Obviously, we're going to do so by looking back on some things we learned over maybe the last month or so on the Derby Trail. And then we're going to dive a little bit into a race at Oaklawn, which we thought was the most compelling of the week. I'll try to talk Bailey Armour off our top pick in the Oaklawn Handicap. Join us next for Horse Sense.
Welcome back to another edition of Horse Sense. As always, I'm Bailey Armour, joined alongside the person who decided not to match me today and wear blue instead of black, as always, Scott Shapiro. It's so good to be back with you guys this week as we cover another week of Triple Crown Trail conversations. We're just 16 days away from the Kentucky Derby now. Things are heating up. I don't know about you, Scott. Personally, I am very excited for all of the hubbub here in Lexington and adjacent Louisville as we get closer to Derby. Things seem to get busier and busier, but as the days goes on, I'm getting pretty hyped. Lots of great promotions coming your way on Xpressbet and FirstBet, so make sure you check all of those out this weekend. Scott, what's going on in your world?
Lots of Derby thought and lots of Keeneland as well, Bailey. I too am excited. I know this is easily the best time of the year to live in the Commonwealth state, whatever you want to call it, that you live in.
Commonwealth.
Yeah, hopefully. We have 50 states. It's a state. But anyway, and it is a great time to be there. You know, the weather's getting better. And to me, there's nothing like that Derby feel. You really don't know what it's like until you get there and experience it. And I got it pretty strong for 6 years. Looking forward, though, to enjoying it from home this year and hopefully getting journalism to the start of that Triple Crown that I'm joking around that he's going to win.
That's a funny way to say sovereignty, but you can say it however you want to say it. It's fine with me.
Well, as Bailey and I have both mentioned already, the Derby is just a little over 2 weeks away. We don't have the post positions yet. Obviously, that'll be a week from Saturday. Be drawn that evening a little earlier than usual, but still plenty of time until that. But we're starting to get a really good feel for the field. Obviously, there might be a couple of defections as we get closer. We see that normally over the years, but I think we have a pretty good idea to at least talk about some lessons. Overall, last week we just looked back at a couple of the specific races, the Bluegrass and the Santa Anita Derby, but we're looking big picture now. We're thinking ahead. And I'm going to kick it to you, Bailey. We're both going to do a pair of lessons that we learned over the final prep. So that would be the Louisiana Derby, basically all the way up until the Lexington, but I don't think either of us are going to include that. So I'm going to kick it to you, Bailey, for your first lesson learned in recent times about this year's Derby.
First lesson learned in recent times about this year's Derby, and I am so serious when I say this, and I have such strong conviction about this. After watching the Bluegrass again from that special Tuesday edition, Owen Almighty, hear me loud and clear, Owen Almighty does not want to go the distance of the Kentucky Derby. I don't know why I am so fired up and so passionate about this, but just now, after doing this, research for our show this week, the Kentucky Derby is not the race for Owen Almighty. He should have gone to the Pate Mile. He was going to go to the Pate Mile, and then the owners have decided that they would rather take a shot in the Kentucky Derby. It's your horse. It's your right to run your horse in whatever race you want to do. When you have Brian Lynch saying that he was already concerned about Owen Almighty's chances of getting this distance when he could barely get the Bluegrass distance, he is so much better suited for a mile. And the Kentucky Derby only pays to fifth. It only pays $150,000 to fifth. The Pate Mile pays all the way out to last place, and you would still make money to run in the Pate Mile. Please, for the love of God, just take this horse to the Pate Mile. He doesn't want to go in the Kentucky Derby with this many horses to go this far. He's not going to finish in the money, and you have a much better chance of continuing to boost your graded stakes resume if you take the Pate Mile. Hell, all. Do what Seize the Gray did last year. I almost cussed a little bit worse than that, so sorry, because I'm so fired up about it. Do what Seize the Gray did last year. Take the Pat Day Mile, run in the Preakness. That could be a better spot if he, wants to stretch out a little bit then. He's just not ready for it, and I don't think the Kentucky Derby is the race for him at all.
What place would you predict him for if you don't have him in the top 5? 20 horses. We'll assume 20 horses.
Assuming 20 horses, 14th or worse.
Okay, that's a strong statement, and I don't have any really combating for it. I think he's a very talented horse, so we agree that it's not about him being outclassed per se, but it's the distance, for Owen Almighty, who when the trainer, Brian Lynch was dealt with this in years past once before of Classic Causeway. I don't know if you remember. It wasn't necessarily about distance, but it was just he didn't want to run the horse in the Derby because he knew it would hurt the horse's chances, etc., of getting better. That didn't really prove to be true, and there's not really data for that. But at the same point, you're missing other races, so you're blowing opportunities, and you're probably going to need some time. So hard for me to argue, but knowing that I like mostly off the pace runners this year, I don't mind there being another horse that's going to be sent aggressively to hopefully ensure an honest pace. I'm going to go to a little bit more big picture, not big picture, but more than one horse conversation. And it's going to be California based for the most part, but more Bob Baffert based. We know Bob knows how to win the Kentucky Derby. Obviously has not been there the last couple of years. A couple of his horses were in other names, to be quite fair, but not Bob, and Bob will be back this year. And a couple of months ago, maybe even less, it looked like Bob had a huge chance to win the Derby in his return. Barnes, Cornucopia, I know you didn't like Bailey, but a lot did, and I still think he might have run one of the best preps. I know you don't really care to look at it like that, but you should. And but then Citizen Bull, obviously the juvenile winner, and Rodriguez, Gaming. So there was a lot of them in the mix. They slowly have dropped off. So what I've learned lesson-wise is that I don't know if Bob Baffert is as strong as we thought he would be, and maybe all of his horses are worth tossing. But, is this a case of Bob, look, he's one of the best Kentucky Derby trainers in history, regardless of what you think of him otherwise. But is this the case where Bob's getting a little older? Is it the horses? It's just an interesting phenomenon, because I definitely thought he had a big chance to win the first leg of the Triple Crown like he has done so many times before, and I'm not so sure that's in the cards this year. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you there, which kind of parlays me into my next lesson, which is a little more granular horse-wise, like you mentioned. As we came out, over the winter, whatever, early spring, it looked like he had maybe 5 horses that could have been strong contenders for a Derby win. And it looked like there was some early talk, like maybe this is going to be his comeback year. Like, these horses are nice, big horses. They're multiple $1 million yearlings, 2-year-olds, whatever. He's got this big stacked stable. And the one horse that I did not expect to kind of come out victorious amongst the 4 or 5 of them was Rodriguez, winning the Wood Memorial after the disappointing finish of Citizen Bull and Barnes from the Santa Anita Derby. Rodriguez, have we been underestimating him? I feel like I certainly have been underestimating him. I mean, obviously the Wood hasn't produced a Derby winner since Funny Side. Is
Been
that
a while.
right?
I mean, Mo Donegal's the best one. That's, it's not only that they haven't produced a winner, it's just there hasn't been a lot of live Wood Memorial races. But Funny Side was a winner, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, still a 100-point prep, but maybe not in the same caliber anymore as the Santa Anita Derby and the Bluegrass in terms of these like final preps, Lexington excluded, because that's not really like a full Derby prep anymore. But is Rodriguez now a better horse than Citizen Bull and Matticat Road, Bob's other 2 Derby horses? And why is it that this training style is not translating well to the East Coast into the Derby this year? This is my, maybe hypothesis for you or anybody else in the comments, whatever. Like, I feel like Bafferts have always historically run a certain way, and in between takes, I was like, hey, can you think of Bafferts that weren't strong early speed horses, gate to wire in that Big Blue Shadow or whatever? And you can name like 2, but most of them are.
Name 2
not,
in 2 seconds.
I know, but I'm saying they're the exception, not the rule, right? Like,
Trains
what
for
is
speed,
it?
no doubt. Yeah.
right. What is it about this year's field and this year's Derby that model isn't just fitting? So maybe Rodriguez is the best of the three. And I definitely, if you would have asked me that 4 months ago, I would not have picked this horse.
So your lesson is don't snooze on Rodriguez, or is it snooze on all the others and maybe Rodriguez is decent? Which one?
I would say snooze on the others and Rodriguez could be decent.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, that's good stuff. I mean, obviously, based on what I said, I'm probably going to be leaning towards fading Rodriguez, who to me took advantage of a weaker field. You know, his 2 races in California, he was kind of, the rides were odd, and it seemed like that, not in his favor. But at the same point, he was goofy. Maybe he's figured it out. I think the blinkers came off right before the wood, and he still had that speed. I just see a lot of other speed, and I'm not sure he's good enough to be able to deal with all of that with the other speed and just overall quality. But maybe he's getting better both mentally and as the distances get longer. I'm going to go with a macro take, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this overall in specifics next week, talking about the horses that will provide it. But I think over the last month, I've learned that we're going to have another contentious, fast pace in the Derby. If you look over the last 3 years, the 11 of the 12 horses that hit the Super were off the pace type horses. Whether you look at Epicenter, who wasn't necessarily that type, but was off the pace, like a mid-pack trip in the Derby. Obviously, there's a lot of dead closers. And then Mystic Dan was probably the next closest to Epicenter and he wasn't on the pace. So it's been a lively pace for years. We saw that perfect stalking outside trip right up and on the pace be so effective. But over the last 3 years, the pace has been really hot. And I think that we're pretty much ensured that again, assuming, a number of these jocks don't change their tactics built, given the last couple of years. But it really seems like it's a hard thing to deny that the pace will be honest. And I know I'm hoping for that. And I bet you are as well.
With our 2 closing favorites in journalism and sovereignty?
Well, sovereignty for sure. I don't necessarily think journalism needs like the hot pace to win. I just need he needs honest. But even the other horses, I think sovereignty is going to run well. I just don't think he's going to win. And then the price horses that I like, we'll talk about over the next couple of weeks. But I think the price horses that I think can get into the try in the Super are mostly off the pace types as well.
I think so. I think that's one of the things that I look forward to more so about a lot of these big race days now is looking for price horses to fill out the try in the Super. What do we think about, and this is just me throwing a curveball at you that we didn't talk about before, what do we think about the Japanese horses in the try in the Super this year? Admire, Daytona, and Luxor Cafe.
I give much more of a chance to Luxor Cafe, but let's give the people a little bit of a tease. We can talk a little bit more about that over the next couple of weeks as we dive into the field. And I'm hoping that you give a little bit of additional international insight in some other spots, because I always look for your insight on that. But anyway, Luxor Cafe will not be a horse that I'm going to let beat me, though, to your original question.
You heard it here first.
Well, we don't have massive races like we have over the last several weeks. To be honest, from the 3-year-old team, we've got basically nothing. So we're going to shift gears to a older horse race with some, familiar names to those that have been following the Derby trail and whatnot over the years, and some really talented older horses in here. It's the Oaklawn Handicap. It's a grade 2, and Bailey, $1.25 million purse. So certainly a purse you and I wouldn't mind getting a slice of in real life. But we're going to try to talk about it and help people get a slice of the pools here. We're going to do the old talk me off horse, as we suggested, obviously, before the segment started. And I'm curious in this race who you want me to talk you off, because I could see a few different options for you, just knowing how you go about things.
You know me so well, and this one is an oldie but a goodie. But I'm going to take maybe a horse that I wouldn't necessarily have picked at first blush. You've got 2 pretty short price horses on the morning line, some experienced older horses in Skippy Longstocking and First Mission. But I'm going to take a stand against both of them this time with the number 5, Alexander Helios, who is 5-1 on the morning line, I believe. You're the one that's got the printed out. He's 4-1. Okay, 4-1, thank you, on the morning line. This is a horse that made his first stakes appearance last time out in the Razorback for Saffie Joseph. Had been in Saffie's barn, switched out of it, and then came back. He's got 15 lifetime starts, so like he's kind of been around the block and then some. Maybe just newer to stakes company. But his third start back, was what I thought was kind of intriguing, even more so to me than the Razorback, was that his third start back in May of 2024, which is a long time ago, but that was an allowance optional against Hit Show, who just went over and like shocked the world internationally. So this is a horse that can compete with horses of this caliber, in my opinion. And I think if Saffie is pointing him towards this race all the way out in Oaklawn, then that's definitely going to tell me something. So I'm going to play him against, like I said, those two shorter prices, First Mission, who he beat last out in the Razorback. What cons do you have for me?
Yeah, this is a horse that I really, think is moving in the right direction. He's got success over the course. In fact, Oaklawn, a unique surface. From what I hear, I've never raced over it personally, but 4 starts,
Yeah.
2 wins, and 2/3. Now, last time out, I would say he was a benefactor, like the runner-up, Banishing, who's also in this, of a very speed-favoring racetrack there. First Mission, who sat third, was almost able to run them down, but even he wasn't able to overcome it as the 2-1 favorite. Nobody else made any sort of impression. So, assuming that the track is more fair, I think that will potentially hurt Alexander Helios's running style. You put Luis Saez up for Tyler Gaffalione, who we know is hurt. So that might hurt him, and then you combine that with the class question now, if he was on an 8 track last time, and then the 1 1/8, which I'm not necessarily worried about overall, but if you look at his performances, yeah, he ran second to Hit Show at a 1 1/8, but Warrior Johnny, who ran third, is just a decent horse, and his wins have come at a shorter distances of late. Although he did win, the 1 1/8 isn't really a big concern to me, I shouldn't say, but you gotta rise up in class, and then the final piece of the puzzle is, he's going to need a speed favoring racetrack or the ability to stalk and finish, because Tarantino and Banishing to his outside are quicker than him. I think especially with Ricardo Santana Jr. aboard, Ricardo taking over for Pratt, who had this horse up and on the pace. Banishing, I don't think, is a win candidate at 1 1/8, even though he's continuing to win races. But I think he and Tarantino will make life difficult on Alexander Helios. So I would need at least the 4-1 price, but I'm not overly against this horse and kind of respect his chances.
Thank you so much for watching another edition of Horse Sense. As always, I'm Bailey Armour and was joined alongside the classically trained Scott Shapiro as we covered some more Derby chatter, if you will, heading into the Kentucky Derby, which is just 16 days away, as well as Saturday's $1.25 million Oaklawn Handicap coming up. Make sure you check out all the promotions on Xpressbet and FirstBet this weekend. We've got a nice roster for you, so don't forget to load up that FirstBet account and let us know in the comments what you think of the contenders as we head into the Kentucky Derby on Saturday, May 3rd.